me, please! Leave me alone! Leave me alone! I don't have any money!
Rosa's voice echoed through the narrow Seoul alleyway, her breath coming in ragged gasps as her feet pounded against the wet pavement. The neon signs above blurred into streaks of color, red, blue, pink, as she ran, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. She'd noticed them 3 blocks ago. 2 men, then 3, then 4, all moving with the same predatory purpose. At first, she told herself she was being paranoid. Seoul was safe. She'd walked these streets dozens of times after leaving Minjai's apartment. But when she turned down the alley shortcut to the main road, they'd followed. Now, she was running for her life. "Please," she screamed, not daring to look back. "I don't have anything. Just leave me alone." Her medical textbooks, the ones she'd been studying at the cafe, tumbled from her bag as she ran, pages scattering across the ground like fallen leaves. She didn't stop to pick them up. Couldn't stop. The footsteps behind her were getting closer. Rosa's lungs burned. Her vision swam. She could see the main street ahead, the glow of traffic lights, the promise of people, safety, witnesses. A figure stepped out directly in front of her. She skidded to a halt, nearly falling, her sneakers sliding on the slick pavement. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black suit that seemed to swallow the light. His face was impassive, cold, and he was pointing a gun directly at her head. "Rosa Collins," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. Her blood turned to ice. He knew her name. How do you know my name?" Her voice came out as a whisper, barely audible over the sound of the rain that had just started to fall. The other men closed in behind her, cutting off any escape. She was surrounded. The man with the gun tilted his head slightly, studying her like she was an insect pinned to a board. "You're coming with us." No, I don't know you. I don't know what you want." "You come with us now," he interrupted, his tone never changing. "Or I put a bullet in your head right here. Your choice." Rosa's knees nearly buckled. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. She'd survived deportation, survived losing everything, survived living in limbo in a country where she barely spoke the language. She couldn't die in an alley in Seoul, shot by men she didn't know for reasons she couldn't understand. "Please," she whispered, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "Please, I'll do whatever you want. Just don't." "Then get in the car." A black SUV pulled up at the mouth of the alley, engine purring like a predator. The door opened. Rosa looked at the gun, at the men surrounding her, at the dark interior of the vehicle that looked like a mouth ready to swallow her whole. She had no choice. Trembling, she climbed inside. The blindfold was rough against Rosa's skin, tied tight enough to make her head ache. She couldn't see anything, just darkness, and the occasional flash of light that filtered through the fabric when they passed under street lamps. Her hands were zip-tied in her lap, not tight enough to cut off circulation, but enough to make it clear. She was a prisoner. The SUV smelled like leather and gun oil. No one spoke. The only sounds were the hum of the engine and the whisper of tires on wet asphalt. Rosa tried to count the turns, tried to memorize the route the way she'd seen people do in movies, but her mind was too scattered, too consumed by terror. Who are these people? What do they want with me? She thought of Minjai, probably asleep in his apartment, unaware that she'd left for a walk and never come back. Would he even notice she was gone? They'd fought again tonight, about money, about her attitude. He told her she was ungrateful, that she should be on her knees thanking him for letting her stay in Korea. She'd left to clear her head. Now she might never see him again. The car slowed, then stopped. Rosa heard gates opening, heavy, metal, the kind that suggested wealth and security. They drove for another minute, then stopped again. The door opened. Rough hands grabbed her arms, pulled her out. She stumbled, nearly fell, but they held her upright and marched her forward. Then the blindfold was ripped off. Rosa blinked against the sudden light, her eyes struggling to adjust. She was in a massive study, all dark wood paneling and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a chandelier overhead that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime. Leather furniture, abstract art on the walls, a bar in the corner stocked with bottles that gleamed like jewels, and on a cream-colored leather couch in the center of the room, a man was bleeding out. "Oh my God," Rosa breathed. He was older, mid-50s maybe, with silver-streaked black hair and a face that might have been handsome if it weren't twisted in pain and fury. His white shirt was soaked through with blood, dark and spreading from a wound in his side. His breathing was labored, shallow. His skin had the grayish pallor of someone going into shock. 3 men stood around him, all armed, all watching Rosa. The bleeding man's eyes snapped to her, and even half dead, the force of his gaze made her step back involuntarily. "I'm dying," he snarled at his men, his voice rough with pain and rage. "And you bring me a whore?" Rosa flinched at the word. One of the men, the lieutenant who'd held the gun to her head, bowed slightly. "Sir, she's a nurse, medical student, American trained. We verified it. I need a goddamn nurse, not some—" The man broke off, coughing, and blood flecked his lips. "No hospitals, sir," the lieutenant said quietly. "You said no hospitals. No records, no witnesses." The bleeding man, clearly someone important, someone powerful, glared at Rosa with eyes like black ice. "Then she better be good. Because if I die, she dies too. Right here, right now. You understand me?" Rosa couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. She just stood there, shaking, staring at this man who was simultaneously threatening her and bleeding to death in front of her. I, she stammered. "Do you understand?" he roared, and the effort made him convulse with pain. "Yes," Rosa gasped. "Yes, I understand. Then save my life." "I can't. You need to go to a hospital. You need a surgeon." Rosa's voice was shaking as badly as her hands. She stood frozen, staring at the gunshot wound in the man's side, at the blood pooling beneath him on the expensive leather couch, at his face going paler by the second. This was insane. This was impossible. She'd had 2 years of medical school before her student visa expired, before her scholarship fell through, before she'd been deported back to nothing. She knew anatomy, knew basic procedures, but she wasn't a doctor. She wasn't even a nurse. And this man needed a trauma surgeon. The man's hand shot out and grabbed her throat. Rosa gasped, clawing at his fingers, but even wounded and dying, his grip was iron. He pulled her down until her face was inches from his, until she could smell the blood and sweat and something darker underneath. "Listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice low and deadly despite the pain. "Not one soul knows what happened here tonight. No hospitals, no police, no witnesses. You fix me here, or we both die in this room. Do you understand?" He squeezed tighter. Black spots danced at the edges of Rosa's vision. "I understand," she choked out. He released her. She stumbled back, gasping, her hand going to her throat. "Then stop wasting time," he said. Rosa looked around wildly. The men were watching her, hands on their weapons. There was no way out, no escape. If she refused, they'd kill her. If she tried and failed, they'd kill her. If she somehow succeeded, she didn't know what would happen then. I need supplies," she said, her voice trembling but steadier now. Medical training was kicking in, overriding the panic. Clean towels, hot water, bandages, alcohol, rubbing alcohol, not drinking. Needle and thread, surgical if you have it, regular if you don't. Painkillers, antibiotics if possible. The lieutenant nodded to one of the other men, who disappeared through a side door. Rosa approached the couch, her heart hammering. Up close, the wound looked worse. The bullet had entered just below his ribs on the left side. No exit wound, which meant the bullet was still inside. She needed to extract it, clean the wound, stitch him up, pray there was no internal bleeding she couldn't see. With hands she couldn't quite control, She pressed a wadded-up jacket someone handed her against the wound, applying pressure. The man hissed in pain, but didn't cry out. "What's your name?" she asked, not sure why she was asking, just needing to hear something other than the sound of her own terrified breathing. His eyes met hers. Baek Tae-yang. The name meant nothing to her. She was too new to Korea, too isolated in her small world of the cafe and Minjai's apartment and her illegal, liminal existence. She had no idea she was currently trying to save the life of one of the most dangerous men in Seoul. The supplies arrived. Rosa laid them out with shaking hands. Towels, a basin of steaming water, bottles of alcohol and hydrogen peroxide, a curved needle and thread that looked like it came from a sewing kit, a bottle of pills she couldn't read. No anesthetic, no surgical tools, no backup. Just her incomplete training and the absolute certainty that if this man died, she died too. "This is going to hurt," she said quietly. "Everything hurts," Tae-yang replied. "Get on with it." Rosa took a breath, said a prayer to a god she wasn't sure she believed in anymore, and went to work. 2 hours. That's how long it took Rosa to extract the bullet, clean the wound, and stitch Baek Tae-yang back together. 2 hours of blood and pain and the constant suffocating certainty that she was going to fail, that her hands would slip, that she'd nick an artery or miss a piece of shrapnel or sew him up with an infection already spreading through his body. 2 hours of Tae-yang watching her through half-closed eyes, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscles jumping, never once crying out, even when she had to dig into his flesh with fingers and tweezers to find the bullet lodged against his rib. 2 hours of armed men standing over her, guns ready, waiting to see if she'd save their boss or become just another body to dispose of. When she finally tied off the last stitch and sat back, her entire body was shaking. Her scrubs, borrowed from somewhere in this massive estate, were soaked with his blood. It was under her fingernails, smeared across her forearms, probably on her face, though she didn't dare check. She'd done it. Somehow, impossibly, she'd done it. Tae-yang's breathing had steadied. The bleeding had stopped. His color was still terrible, gray and waxy, but he was alive, conscious, watching her with those cold, calculating eyes. "Is it done?" he asked, his voice rough. "Yes," Rosa whispered, "but you need antibiotics. Real antibiotics, not whatever pills you have here. And you need to be monitored. If there's internal bleeding, if infection sets in, will I live through the night?" Rosa hesitated. Then, "Probably, if nothing goes wrong. Then I'll live." He said it with such absolute certainty, such complete confidence in his own survival, that Rosa almost believed him. She stood on trembling legs, stepped back from the couch. One of the men handed her a towel. She wiped her hands mechanically, watching the white terry cloth turn red, feeling like she was moving through a dream. She'd saved his life. She'd held up her end of the bargain. Now they'd let her go. They had to. That was the deal. Tae-yang's eyes never left her face. He studied her for a long moment, then turned to the lieutenant. "Kill her," he said. "No loose ends. Welcome to this new story, Soul Stories lovers. If you're new here, welcome to the dark side of Seoul. This is where forbidden romance meets the deadly underworld of Korean mafia lords, where one medical student's fight for survival becomes something far more dangerous than she ever imagined. Hit that subscribe button because Rosa's story is just beginning. And trust me, you do not want to miss what happens when a 24-year-old illegal immigrant becomes bound to a silver-haired mafia king who's 31 years older than her and absolutely ruthless. Age gaps, forbidden attraction, life or death stakes, morally gray characters you'll fall for anyway? This is your next obsession, where survival is negotiated in blood, secrets are currency, and mercy is the most dangerous thing you can ask for. Soul Stories family, you know the drill. Let me know the time you saw his video. New viewers, welcome to your new addiction. Let's dive in. Rosa's world tilted. "What?" The word came out as barely a breath. No, You said... Guns rose around her. Safeties clicked off. The men's faces were impassive, professional. They'd done this before. I said, if I died, you died, Tae-yang corrected, his voice still calm despite the pain he must be in. I never promised you'd live if I did. You're a witness, a liability. I don't keep loose ends. Please, Rosa's voice cracked. Tears streamed down her face. Please, I saved your life. I did everything you asked. You can't... I can do whatever I want. The lieutenant raised his gun, aimed it at her head. Rosa's mind raced, desperate, terrified, searching for anything that might save her. Wait, I can be your private nurse. If something like this happens again, and it will, won't it? Men like you, this kind of life, you'll need medical care you can't get at a hospital. No questions, no records, no witnesses, just me. I'll come whenever you call. No one will ever know. Tae-yang's eyebrow rose slightly. And why would I trust you not to run straight to the police? Because I have more to lose than you do. The words tumbled out in a rush. I'm nobody. I'm illegal here. My visa expired. I was deported from the US. I'm living in limbo in my boyfriend's apartment, working under the table, one phone call away from being sent back to nothing. You have leverage over me forever. One word from you, and I'm gone. You can control me, use me. I'm more useful alive than dead. Please. Silence. Tae-yang studied her, and Rosa couldn't read his expression. Was he considering it, or just deciding whether to make her death quick or slow? Finally, he spoke. You mentioned tonight to anyone, and I kill you. And everyone you love, your boyfriend, your friends, your family back home, everyone. Do you understand? Relief flooded through Rosa so intensely, she nearly collapsed. Yes, I understand. You come when I call. You ask no questions. You tell no one. Yes, if you run, I'll find you. I won't run. Another long silence. Then Tae-yang waved his hand dismissively. Get her out of here. The lieutenant grabbed Rosa's arm, started pulling her toward the door. She went willingly, desperately, barely able to believe she was still alive. As they left the study, she heard Tae-yang's voice one more time, quiet and cold. Don't make me regret this, Rosa Collins. The SUV dropped Rosa off 3 blocks from Minjai's apartment. They didn't want anyone seeing where she lived, the lieutenant had explained. Didn't want any connection between her world and theirs. Rosa stumbled out onto the sidewalk at 4:47 a.m., still wearing the blood-soaked scrubs. Her mind blank with shock and exhaustion. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, reflecting the glow of streetlights and the first pale hints of dawn. She walked like a ghost, one foot in front of the other, not really seeing anything. She'd almost died tonight. Should have died. Would have died if she hadn't managed to talk her way out of it. And now she was bound to them, to him, to Baek Tae-yang, and whatever dark world he inhabited. What have I done? Rosa let herself into the apartment building, took the elevator to the 4th floor. Her hands were still shaking as she fumbled with her keys. When the door finally opened, she stepped inside and found Minjai waiting for her. He was sitting on the couch in the dark, still dressed in the clothes he'd worn earlier. The moment the light from the hallway hit her, he shot to his feet. Where the hell have you been? His voice was loud enough to wake the neighbors. It's almost 5 in the morning. I've been calling you for hours. He stopped mid-sentence, staring at her, at the blood covering her scrubs, at her pale, shock-white face, at the way she was trembling, swaying on her feet like she might collapse at any moment. Rosa? His anger shifted to something else. Confusion, maybe fear. Jesus Christ, what happened? Whose blood is that? Rosa opened her mouth to answer, but no words came out. She just stood there, staring at him, her mind replaying the feel of Tae-yang's blood on her hands, the sound of guns cocking, the cold certainty of her own death. Rosa. Minjai crossed the room, grabbed her shoulders. Talk to me. Are you hurt? What happened? Whose blood? I'm not hurt, she whispered. Then whose? I can't tell you. Minjai's hands tightened on her shoulders. What do you mean you can't tell me? Look at you. You're covered in blood. Where have you been? What have you been doing? Rosa pulled away from him, stumbled toward the bathroom. I need to shower. No, you need to tell me what's going on. Right now. She turned to look at him, saw the suspicion already forming in his eyes. The jealousy. The possessiveness that had been getting worse for months. Someone was hurt, she said carefully. I helped them, that's all. Who? I can't. Who, Rosa? A patient. A private patient. I can't discuss it. Bullshit. Minjai's face was flushing now, his voice rising again. You don't have patience. You're not even a real nurse. You're a dropout medical student working at a fucking cafe. So I'll ask you one more time. Where were you? And who were you with? The accusation in his tone was unmistakable. Rosa felt something crack inside her, something that had been breaking for a while now. You think I was cheating on you? Were you? I was saving someone's life. You're lying. I can see it. You've been lying for weeks now, acting strange, hiding things, disappearing. I'm not. Are you fucking someone else? The question came out as a roar. Is that where you were? Is that whose blood you're wearing? Rosa stared at him, too exhausted and traumatized to even be angry. I need to shower, she said again, her voice completely flat. She walked into the bathroom and locked the door behind her. Minjai pounded on it, yelling questions and accusations, but Rosa didn't hear him anymore. She turned on the water as hot as it would go and stepped under the spray fully clothed, watching Baek Tae-yang's blood swirl down the drain in pink rivers. She stayed there until the water ran clear, until her skin was red and raw, until Minjai finally gave up and went to bed. And even then, she couldn't stop shaking. The next 2 weeks passed in a haze. Rosa went through the motion of her life, working at the cafe, studying her medical textbooks, sleeping on the far edge of the bed she shared with Minjai. But she felt like a ghost, like she was watching herself from somewhere outside her body. Minjai didn't believe her story. He made that clear every day with his questions, his accusations, his increasingly paranoid surveillance of her movements. He checked her phone constantly, demanded to know where she was going, who she was seeing, what she was doing every moment they were apart. I'm the only reason you're still in Korea, he reminded her at least once a day. Don't forget that. Without me, you'd be deported. You'd have nothing. Rosa knew he was right. That's what made it so suffocating. She'd met Minjai during his exchange program at her university in the US. He'd been kind then, sweet, attentive. When her scholarship fell through and her student visa expired, when she'd been sent back to Ghana with no degree and no prospects, he'd been the one to offer her a lifeline. Come to Korea, he'd said. Stay with me. We'll figure it out together. And she'd been so desperate, so grateful, that she'd said yes. But the Minjai in Korea was different from the Minjai in America. Or maybe he'd always been this way, and she'd just been too desperate to notice. Possessive, jealous, controlling. I should leave, Rosa thought sometimes. I should get out before this gets worse. But where would she go? She had no legal status, no money saved, no family here. Jiwan, her friend from the cafe, was kind but couldn't take her in. The Korean government would deport her in a heartbeat if they knew she was working illegally. Minjai was right. Without him, she had nothing, so she stayed, and felt the walls closing in a little more each day. On the 14th day, after the incident at Tae-yang's estate, Rosa was wiping down tables at the cafe when a black SUV pulled up outside. Her blood turned to ice. She recognized it immediately, the same SUV that had taken her that night. The same tinted windows, the same air of menace. Through the cafe window, she watched as the lieutenant stepped out. He was wearing a suit, looking completely out of place in this neighborhood of students and young professionals. His eyes scanned the street, then locked onto the cafe, onto her. Rosa's coworker, Jiwan, noticed her sudden stillness. Rosa, you okay? I need to... Rosa couldn't finish the sentence. The lieutenant entered the cafe. The few customers glanced up, sensing something off about him, then quickly looked away. He approached Rosa with the same measured, predatory walk she remembered from that night. "Rosa Collins," he said quietly. "Mr. Baek requests your presence." Rosa's hands were shaking. The rag she'd been holding dropped to the floor. "I can't. I'm working. It wasn't a request." Jiwan stepped forward. Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me, but who are you?" The lieutenant didn't even look at her. "Miss Collins, the car is waiting." Rosa's mind raced. She'd known this might happen, had been dreading it, but she'd also somehow convinced herself that maybe it wouldn't, that maybe Tae-yang would forget about her, that the whole nightmare was over. She should have known better. "I need to..." She turned to Jiwan. "I'm sorry. I have to go. Family emergency. Rosa..." But Rosa was already untying her apron with trembling fingers, grabbing her bag, following the lieutenant out of the cafe before Jiwan could ask any more questions. Behind her, through the window, she saw Jiwan watching with worried eyes. The SUV ride felt both eternal and too short. Rosa sat in the back, the lieutenant in the front passenger seat, neither of them speaking. Her mind spun with possibilities, each worse than the last. What does he want? Is the wound infected? Is he dying? Is this when he decides I'm too much of a liability after all? They didn't go to the estate this time. Instead, they drove to a different part of Seoul, Gangnam, the wealthy district, and pulled up in front of a nondescript modern building. From the outside, it looked like any other office building. Bland, forgettable, perfect for someone who needed to hide. The lieutenant led her inside, through a lobby with no security guard, up an elevator to the 3rd floor. The hallway was empty, silent. He stopped at a door marked only with the number 307. Knocked twice, then opened it. "No, wait inside," he said. "Mr. Baek will be with you shortly." Then he left, and Rosa was alone. The apartment, because that's what it was, not an office, was sparsely furnished but expensive. Hardwood floors, minimalist furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A kitchen she could see through an open doorway. A hallway that probably led to bedrooms. Rosa stood in the middle of the living room, her bag clutched to her chest, trying to slow her racing heart. The door to the hallway opened, and Baek Tae-yang walked in. Rosa's breath caught. He looked better. Still pale, still moving carefully, like his side hurt, but alive. Dressed in casual clothes, black slacks and a white button-down shirt, untucked. His hair was damp like he'd just showered. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You came," he said finally. Like she'd had a choice. "You called," Rosa replied, proud that her voice only shook a little. Tae-yang moved to the couch, sat down with a barely perceptible wince. "The wound, he said. "It needs to be cleaned. The stitches checked. I need antibiotics." Rosa blinked. That's why you called me?" What else would it be? Relief and confusion warred in her chest. I thought maybe it was infected or it's healing, but I was told infection is still a risk, that it needs to be monitored." His eyes fixed on hers. "You're the one who did the work. You're the one who checks it." So this is the deal, Rosa thought. This is what I agreed to. "I'll need supplies," she said, falling back on medical professionalism because it was the only thing keeping her together. "Sterile bandages, antiseptic, antibiotics if you have them. In the bathroom, down the hall. Everything you should need is there." Rosa nodded, set down her bag, and went to find the supplies. 10 minutes later, she was back in the living room with her arms full of medical supplies, and they were good supplies. Professional grade. Someone had clearly raided a hospital or pharmacy. Tae-yang had unbuttoned his shirt, revealing the bandage wrapped around his torso. Even through the gauze, Rosa could see that the wound was healing well. No signs of redness or swelling from here. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the bandage. He nodded. Rosa knelt beside the couch, her hands steadier now that she was in medical mode. Carefully, she unwrapped the bandage, exposing the wound. It looked good. The stitches were holding. The wound edges were clean, showing healthy tissue. No pus, no inflammation. It's healing well, she said quietly. You're lucky. Luck had nothing to do with it. You knew what you were doing. Rosa didn't know how to respond to that, so she focused on cleaning the wound with antiseptic, her movements practiced and gentle. Tae-yang watched her work, his face impassive, his breathing steady. You'll need to come back, he said, 3 times a week until the stitches can come out, to change the dressing. Administer antibiotics. Check for infection. Rosa's hands stilled for a moment. 3 times a week. For how long? A month? 2? She looked up at him, saw him watching her with those cold, calculating eyes. This wasn't a one-time thing, she said slowly. Was it? You made a deal. Did you think it would only apply once? No. She'd known. Some part of her had known from the moment she talked her way out of being killed that this would be her life now, bound to this man, to this secret. How long? She asked. Until the wound is fully healed. After that, he paused. We'll see. The threat was implicit. You're mine now, until I decide otherwise. Rosa swallowed hard and returned to her work, wrapping a fresh bandage around his torso with hands that no longer shook. When she was done, Tae-yang stood, buttoning his shirt. From his pocket, he pulled out an envelope and handed it to her. Rosa opened it. Inside was more cash than she made in a month at the cafe. For your services, he said. I don't... Take it. You earned it. Rosa stared at the money, then at him. Is that all? My men will drive you back to your cafe. They'll contact you when it's time for the next visit. He paused. And Rosa? Not a word to anyone. Not your boyfriend, not your friends. No one. I know. Good. The lieutenant appeared in the doorway like a ghost, ready to escort her out. As Rosa gathered her things and followed him, she felt Tae-yang's eyes on her back, watching, assessing, owning. She'd saved his life, and now her life belonged to him. 3 times a week, like clockwork. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The black SUV would pull up outside the cafe, and Rosa would make some excuse to Jiwan, family emergency, doctor's appointment, private nursing job, and climb into the back seat. 20 minutes later, she'd be at the Gangnam hideout, cleaning Tae-yang's wound, checking for infection, administering antibiotics. The routine never varied. She'd arrive, he'd be waiting. She'd work in silence while he watched her with those unreadable eyes. When she was done, he'd hand her an envelope of cash, and the lieutenant would drive her back. They barely spoke beyond medical necessities. Any pain? Some. Fever? No. The stitches are holding well. Good. It was clinical, professional, detached. And yet, Rosa found herself thinking about him between visits, wondering about him. Who was Baek Tae-yang? What had he done to get shot? Why did he need this level of secrecy? She knew better than to ask. The money helped. God, the money helped. For the first time since being deported, Rosa could save. Could dream of maybe, someday, having enough to pay for the rest of her medical education, to get legal status, to build a real life. But the guilt was crushing. She was helping a criminal. She had to be. Why else would he need to avoid hospitals? Why else would his men carry guns and drive like they were expecting an ambush at any moment? Every time she touched him, every time she cleaned his wound and helped him heal, she was complicit in whatever he did next. I'm not a good person, she thought sometimes. Good people don't do this. But good people also didn't survive. At home, things with Minjai got worse. The regular absences, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, always the same pattern, made him suspicious, paranoid, jealous. Where do you go? He demanded. 3 times a week, same times, you disappear for 2 hours. What kind of private nursing job is that rigid? The patient needs regular care. What patient? Who is it? Why can't you tell me? Medical confidentiality. Bullshit. He threw his phone across the room, barely missing her head. You're lying to me. I know you're lying. Rosa didn't argue anymore. There was no point. She just let him rant, let him accuse, let the anger wash over her like a wave. She was getting good at shutting down, at becoming numb. But Minjai noticed that too. "You're different," he said one night, his voice softer, almost pleading. "You've been different since that night you came home covered in blood. What happened to you, Rosa? What are you hiding?" For a moment, she almost told him. Almost let the whole horrible truth spill out. The abduction, the gunshot wound, the deal she'd made to save her own life. But then she remembered Tae-yang's words. "I kill you and everyone you love." So she just shook her head and said, "Nothing. I'm not hiding anything." And the gap between them widened a little more. Jiwan cornered her at the cafe during the third week. "Rosa, we need to talk." Rosa looked up from the espresso machine, already bracing herself. "About what?" "About whatever's going on with you. The black SUV, the mysterious absences. You've lost weight, you barely sleep. You jump every time a car door slams outside." Jiwan's voice softened. "I'm worried about you." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. And those men, Rosa, they don't look like normal people. They look dangerous." "Because they are," Rosa thought. "It's just a job," she said instead. "A good job. The patient pays well and needs regular care." "Then why do you look terrified every time they come for you?" Rosa's hands stilled on the espresso machine. "I'm not." "You are. I can see it." Jiwan reached out, touched her arm gently. "If you're in trouble, you can tell me. If someone's forcing you to do something, no one's forcing me to do anything." "Rosa, please." Rosa pulled her arm back, met Jiwan's eyes. "Please don't ask me any more questions. I can't. If I tell you, you'll be in danger too. So please, just trust me and don't ask." Jiwan stared at her for a long moment, her expression shifting from worry to fear. "What kind of danger?" "The kind you don't want any part of." They didn't speak about it again after that. But Rosa could feel Jiwan watching her, worrying about her, wanting to help but not knowing how. It made the isolation worse, somehow. Knowing she had a friend who cared but couldn't tell her the truth. Knowing she was drowning and couldn't accept the lifeline being offered. The wound healed. By the 4th week, the stitches were ready to come out. Rosa removed them carefully, one by one, while Tae-yang sat perfectly still on the couch in the Gangnam apartment. "That's the last of them," she said, checking her work. The scar would be prominent, a puckered line across his ribs, but clean. No infection, no complications. "You did well," Tae-yang said. It was the closest thing to a compliment he'd ever given her. Rosa packed up her supplies, expecting the usual envelope of cash, the usual silent dismissal. Instead, Tae-yang said, "You'll still need to come. Twice a week now instead of 3. To clean the scar. Apply antibiotic ointment. Make sure it's healing properly." Rosa looked up, surprised. "The wound is closed. You don't really need. I decide what I need." There it was again. That cold certainty. That absolute control. Rosa nodded slowly, understanding what he wasn't saying. "I'm not done with you yet." "Twice a week," she agreed. "Monday and Friday?" "Yes." As she gathered her things to leave, Tae-yang's voice stopped her. "Rosa." She turned back. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not warm, but not entirely cold either. Something in between. "You've kept your word," he said. "Not many people do." She didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and left. But his words stayed with her all the way home. The Friday of the 6th week, Rosa arrived at the Gangnam apartment to find Tae-yang waiting in the living room as usual. But this time, something was different. He was sitting with his shirt already off, the scar visible across his ribs, a thick pink line that would fade to white over time. But that wasn't what caught Rosa's attention. It was the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes, the way he was holding himself like he was in pain. "What's wrong?" Rosa asked, setting down her bag. "Nothing. Do what you came to do." But his voice was strained, and when she came closer, she saw why. There was a fresh bruise blooming across his ribs, just below the healing gunshot wound. Dark purple, spreading. The kind of bruise that came from blunt force trauma. What happened? She asked, professional alarm kicking in. A disagreement. It's nothing. Nothing? You could have re-injured. Let me check. I said it's nothing. But he didn't stop her when she gently pressed her fingers around the edges of the bruise, checking for broken ribs or damage to the healing wound. He winced, barely, when she hit a particularly tender spot. You're lucky, she said quietly. The gunshot wound wasn't affected. But you need to be more careful. The tissue is still fragile. I'll keep that in mind. There was a bite of sarcasm in his tone that made Rosa look up sharply. For the first time, she saw something other than cold calculation in his eyes. Frustration. Maybe even pain that wasn't entirely physical. She cleaned the scar as usual, applied the antibiotic ointment, worked in silence. But she was hyper-aware of him now, of the way his breathing changed when she touched the bruised area, of the tension radiating from his body. When she was done, she sat back. You should ice that bruise. 20 minutes on, 20 off. It'll help with the swelling. I don't need medical advice. Then why am I here? The question came out sharper than she'd intended. But 6 weeks of this, the secrecy, the fear, the isolation was taking its toll. Tae-yang's eyes narrowed slightly. Excuse me? Rosa took a breath, forced herself to meet his gaze. The wound is healed. The scar is clean. You don't need me anymore. So why am I still coming here? Silence. Tae-yang studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he leaned back against the couch. Because I decide when you're done, he said quietly. Not you. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. Rosa held his gaze, something defiant rising in her chest. For 6 weeks, she'd been compliant, obedient, too terrified to push back. But she was tired. So tired of being afraid, of being controlled, of having no agency in her own life. I saved your life, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I kept your secret. I've done everything you asked. What more do you want from me? Everything, Tae-yang replied simply, until I say otherwise. That's not fair. Fair. He actually laughed, a low, humorless sound. You think any of this is about fair? You made a deal to save your life. You don't get to renegotiate just because you're tired of it. Rosa stood abruptly, angry tears pricking at her eyes. I know what I am to you. A liability you haven't decided how to dispose of yet. A secret you need kept. But I'm not your property. Aren't you? The question hung in the air between them, heavy and terrible. Because they both knew the truth. She was his. He owned her through fear, through leverage, through the simple fact that he could destroy her with a single phone call. Rosa grabbed her bag with shaking hands. Is there anything else? Medically? No. Then I'm leaving. She turned toward the door. Your hands are shaking. Tae-yang's voice stopped her mid-step. She looked back to find him watching her with an expression that might have been curiosity. They always shake when you're here, he continued. Why is that? Because I'm terrified, Rosa said bluntly. Because every time I come here, I don't know if this will be the time you decide I'm too much of. A risk. Because I'm one bad day away from ending up in a ditch somewhere. Is that what you want to hear? Something flickered across his face, too fast for her to identify. And yet you keep coming, he said, because you'll kill me if I don't. Would I? Rosa stared at him, confused and angry and exhausted. I don't know. I don't know anything about you. I don't know what you do or why you do it or why you really keep calling me here when you clearly don't need medical care anymore. All I know is that I'm trapped, and you're the one holding the cage door closed. Tae-yang was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, moved toward her, with that careful, predatory grace she'd come to recognize. Rosa forced herself not to step back. He stopped a few feet away, studying her face like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. You want honesty? He asked. I want to understand. You can't understand. You don't know my world. You don't know what I've done, what I've had to become to survive it. And you're better off staying ignorant, little girl. Don't call me a little girl, Rosa protested. I should be thrice your age, little girl, Tae-yang said. Then let me go. No. Why not? Because... He stopped, seeming to reconsider. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost reluctant. Because you're the only person who looks at me and sees a man instead of a monster. Even when you're terrified, even when you hate me, you still see me as human. And He trailed off, something that might have been vulnerability crossing his face before the mask slammed back down. I'm not ready to lose that yet. Rosa's breath caught. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. I don't hate you, she said quietly. You should. I know. They stood there in the silent apartment, the afternoon sun slanting through the windows, two people caught in a web neither of them knew how to escape. Finally, Tae-yang stepped back. The money, I forgot. He pulled an envelope from the desk and handed it to her. Their fingers brushed for a moment, his warm, calloused, unexpectedly gentle. Rosa took the envelope, tucked it into her bag. Monday? She asked. Monday. As she left, she felt his eyes following her all the way to the door. Minjai drove through the industrial district with his hands gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. It was past midnight. Rosa thought he was at a study group. That's what he'd told her. And technically, it wasn't a complete lie. He was meeting with a group, just not the kind that studied textbooks. He pulled up to a warehouse that looked abandoned from the outside. Broken windows, graffiti on the walls, weeds growing through cracks in the pavement. But Minjai knew better. He'd been coming here for 6 months now, long enough to understand what he'd gotten himself into, long enough to know he couldn't get out. He parked around back, used his key to enter, through the side door, and descended the concrete stairs to the basement level. The contrast was jarring. Up above, decay and abandonment. Down below, a fully operational headquarters. Computers, weapons, maps on the walls, men moving with purpose, all of them armed. This was Kwan's operation, and Minjai was part of it. You're late. Minjai turned to find Kwan standing in the doorway of what passed for an office. Really just a converted storage room with a desk and filing cabinets. The older man was in his 50s, scarred and weathered, with eyes that had seen too much violence to ever be fully human again. Sorry, my girlfriend. I don't care about your girlfriend. Kwan gestured him inside. Sit. Minjai sat. The office smelled like cigarette smoke and gun oil. Kwan settled behind the desk, lighting up a cigarette and studying Minjai through the smoke. It's been 3 months, Kwan said. 3 months since we put 3 bullets in Baek Tae-yang. 3 months since you swore to me he was dead. Minjai's stomach twisted. He should be isn't the same as is. We've checked every hospital in Seoul, every private clinic, every doctor we have on payroll. Nothing. No record of anyone matching his description with gunshot wounds. Kwan leaned forward. So either he's dead and his body is hidden somewhere, we can't find it, or he survived. Which means someone treated him. Someone we don't know about. That's impossible. A wound like that, he'd need a surgeon. Not necessarily. A good field medic could do it. Someone with medical training, but no official ties to any hospital. Kwan's eyes narrowed. Someone off the grid. Minjai felt sweat beading on his forehead. You think he has a private doctor? I think he has someone. And I think that person is the key to finding him. Because Tae-yang is careful, paranoid even. He doesn't trust easily. Whoever treated him, he's keeping them close. Which means they're a vulnerability. How do we find them? Oh my God. Did you catch that? Minjai is asking how to find the doctor. And it's Rosa, his own girlfriend. The woman sleeping in his bed every night. He has no idea she's the one keeping Tae-yang alive. She has no idea he works for the cartel that wants Tae-yang dead. 2 people, 2 secrets, 1 catastrophic collision waiting to happen. What time did you see this? Seoul Soul Stories, lovers. Are you screaming? Because I'm screaming. Drop a fire emoji in the comments if this cliffhanger just wrecked you. If this is your first Soul story, subscribe now, because part 2 is coming and it's about to get bloody. Will Minjai discover Rosa is Tae-yang's private doctor? How long before Rosa realizes her boyfriend is Tae-yang's enemy? And that thing growing between Rosa and Tae-yang, that dangerous, forbidden pull, how explosive will it become when the lies unravel? Comment your theories below. Will Minjai betray Rosa to save himself? Will Tae-yang protect her when his enemies come? Will Rosa choose survival or something darker? If you're addicted to morally gray mafia kings with silver hair and full-sleeve tattoos, strong female leads trapped in impossible situations, age gaps that make your heart race, 55 and 24, fight me, Soul's dark underbelly meets forbidden romance, secrets, lies, and catastrophic betrayals, then this is your story. Don't forget, subscribe for part 2, If this story has you in a chokehold, comment with your wildest theories, share with your dark romance-loving friends. In Baek Tae-yang's world, mercy is the most dangerous thing you can beg for.